Dave, I got to tell you, the score over here in Philadelphia is Squirrels 2, Geiger 0.
That's Squirrels 2, Geiger 0? What are we talking about? All right.
I realize this is our first show of the new year, and I'm still talking about Christmas stuff, but I got to tell you, I've got to get this off my chest. I've been putting lights out on my porch for Christmas every year since we bought the house. And that goes back, God, about 20 years or so, right?
Okay.
And now this year, since we did the work on the house, I've got an electrical outlet this year, so I'm not...
fancy.
I'm not feeding it through the window and sitting
You're not doing the welcoming into death where you're like 17 things plugged into one another. Okay,
and we don't have the draft coming through the front window because I insist on threading it through the open window. And I've been looking forward to this in a certain way since we bought the house. And I went out there on the first nice day in December and went out and put up all the decorations. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful. This has never happened to me before. The squirrels are eating my lights.
You're getting squirrel chew?
The squirrels are chewing through the wires. They've completely dismantled 3 strings of lights. I started out with, I've got little posts that hold up the porch roof. I've got lights spiraling up the 2 sides, and then it goes across the top, across the rail, and then across the bottom. One of them is little icicle lights, and then I've got this one like spotlight that has a disco ball attached to it that throws all this multicolored light up on the front of the house. It's very tasteful.
I like how your description of your Christmas decorations is basically like a drag show in Atlanta in 1975.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It'll bring a tear to your eye.
Okay.
And I mean that. But the squirrels have chewed through 3, and actually it's just one squirrel. See, the problem you got here in the city.
Oh, you're so worked up right now. It's all you got a head of steam behind you.
See, what happens is people come in like from the suburbs and stuff and live in the city for the first time, and they have these unrealistic views of what you're supposed to do. They got bird feeders out there, Dave. Now, listen, in the suburbs, I understand
that's
a bird
perfectly
feeder.
fine in the suburbs, yeah.
In the city, actually, what you're doing is overnight, you're feeding rats and mice, and in the day, you're feeding squirrels. We've got this squirrel. He clocks in at about 25, 26 pounds. And by the way, squirrels are just rats with better PR. There's no difference between a rat and a squirrel, except the fuzzy tail. So this squirrel comes in 25 pounds worth and starts chewing. My wife, who's working from home now, sees out the front window the squirrel's back. And she can scare him away all she wants. He's going to come right back. Chewed through 3 of my Christmas lights. At this point, all I've got is my very tasteful disco ball, 1 spiral, and 1 measly little line that goes across the front. It's like if a jack-o'-lantern were holiday lights. That would be my display principle right now.
Oh my God! Yeah, squirrel chew is that's a legit phenomenon. It's actually called squirrel chew, and they go to town on the insulation and the wrapping of electrical wires because they use it, I guess, for their nesting.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And so, fun fact for people that read Carl Kerschel's Abominable Charles Christopher, there is a comic about Squirrel Chew, because I was telling Carl about Squirrel Chew, I was talking about Squirrel Chew, and he goes, "Oh, can I use that for a comic?" And so there is an Abominable Charles Christopher about Squirrel Chew, brought to you in part by Dave Kellett. There you go.
Unbelievable. But that makes me wonder, maybe I could make a deal with these squirrels if I just left a couple of the old wires that they've already ruined. They could chew that all they wanted for their insulation and leave my good ones alone.
Well, maybe, but a part of the problem is they want to get close to that Brad Geiger magic, and they're seeing this light display that's really it's top of form. They're like, wait a minute, is this actually plugged into a new electrical socket and not 15 old Walmart electric extension cords? Then this is what I want as a squirrel.
It's a thing of beauty. I sat out on the porch without putting a single light in, just admiring the electrical cord. It was just,
isn't that stupid?
It
As
was
a
just
homeowner,
wonderful.
Isn't that like when we moved into our new house? This house had special electrical outlets just under the eave with
Yeah.
a special switch on a timer. And to me, as a homeowner, this is our third house now, and to me, that seemed like magic.
Yeah.
Like whoever had thought to put that in, I was like, that is electrical magic.
It's so thoughtful.
And now in California, I don't know if they have this in Philadelphia, now LEDs have gotten so cheap and omnipresent that they actually sell an eave that can be permanently installed into a house that has LEDs built into the eave. And so if you're having a birthday party, you can put it on. If you have Hanukkah, you can make it blue. If you have Christmas, you can make it green and red. If you have Halloween, you can make it orange and black. Which is brilliant. You know, that's an honest to God brilliant like innovation for house design.
I would pay double for that. I would pay double.
Well, in Philadelphia though, you don't have eaves, right? Technically, no. Or I guess over your porch you have an eave, right?
There's it's kind of built into the porch. There's like actually a little hole at the top of the porch roof. Everything drains into that, and then down a funnel or a spigot. What do you call the vertical part? I guess those are eaves too. But yeah.
Well, does it make you kind of in a grandfatherly way happy that you have raised two wonderful sons and now maybe have contributed to the birth and raising of 4 to 5 sweet baby squirrels, Brad, now? That nest is made warmer by the Christmas lights that you have provided to those baby squirrels.
No, actually, no, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. No, I really can't stand them. And of course, the other thing that I'm always thinking is they're getting comfortable coming up to the house. It's just a matter of time before they start figuring out ways to get into the house, and then you got real problems.
Squirrels don't come into a house.
They'll get into your attic.
No, they don't. Well, they do get into attics.
Will.
Yes, they do. They do get into attics. They will admit they get into attics.
Yes, they will.
I had what are they called? Dutch rats get into my last house into the attic.
Oh gosh.
They're the big ones. They get and unfortunately, right behind my house there was avocado trees, and it's pure fat and like dietary needs of a rat. Mm-hmm. So I was getting like, not honest to God, 3-4 pound rats, like just gigantic Dutch rats. And there was one that I had killed right by the little pull down ladder to my attic, and my niece was helping me unload stuff from my attic, and I said, "All right, Sophie. As you come up the ladder, whatever you do, don't look to your right." Because and then, of course, because I said that in all the way that language works, she immediately looks to her right, and there is a rat stuck in rigor mortis, but like from a horror movie going, "Ha!" right at her face level. So I won Uncle of the Year that year,
you
Brad.
couldn't have planned that any better.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about squirrel maintenance and making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, his pal, and the creator of... I forgot what I am!
What are you?
I'm the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And Bradley J., I'm going to jump us into our first question of the year. This comes in from, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Takaka. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Bradley?
That looks correct.
I think with apologies if I'm messing that up, they're saying, "Hi, Brad and Dave. I really like slice of life as a genre in comics and wanted to know, what do you think of it? And since it's a bit vague and varying in its definition, how would you describe slice of life? Could, in theory, gag-a-day, or as you describe it, choke-a-joke, sometimes be slice of life, too? Thanks for the great show. Gives me something to look forward to in these trying times." Well, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. And Bradley J., the question to you is slice of life comics. What do you think of them? And then I guess the secondary or primarily, how would you describe or define slice of life comics?
Pass.
Now, all right, that's a pass for Brad.
We're going to the second question. This is our first show of the new year. Couldn't you give me a question where I can be upbeat and optimistic and happy, Brad?
Oh, no. Are we about to get curmudgeonly, Brad?
I'm telling you, there's...
You kids and your slice of life comics, get off my lawn.
I despise the term slice of life, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to make an argument that you shouldn't use the term slice of life.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and I'm going to make the argument that you shouldn't like slice of life.
Well,
they're terrible.
I'm going to make the argument that you already don't like slice of life. You just never lined it up. But here's the problem with slice of life comics. Slice of life automatically tells the audience that this will be boring. because
Yeah.
life on its own, unvarnished, is boring.
Yes.
That's why we have artists and writers and people who are creative to break up the boring. Because we know, and listen, if my life was that interesting, I wouldn't buy a TV, I'd buy a mirror, right? Slice of life immediately tells your audience that it's going to be boring, because if it wasn't, you'd call it humor or sci-fi or romantic comedy or adventure. You'd have any number of words. It could be still based on things that happened in your daily life.
Right.
But Curb Your Enthusiasm is not a slice of life series. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
Larry David may take things out of his life and extrapolate it, but it's not a slice of his life. I guarantee you a slice of Larry David's life is unwatchable.
Yeah.
But Curb Your Enthusiasm is unmissable. That's the difference between a comedy and a slice of life.
You're saying that the true slice of life is almost sans artifice, but when you want to make something interesting, you add the artifice layer on top of it. You add the art making on top of slice of life.
That's absolutely right. Here's what I'm saying. Reality TV has writers, because they couldn't just set cameras up.
That's true, it does.
Right? Documentary films have editors, because they couldn't just show you the documentary footage. Somebody has to edit that and narrate it and make it interesting so that you'll watch it. The problem with slice of life is that you are already indicating yourself. You're trying to by using that term, you're trying to pull the bar down. You're saying, don't expect too much out of this. It's only a slice of life.
Yeah.
If this was good, it would be a comedy. If this was good, it would be a drama. It's not. It's a slice of life.
If it was good, it would be.
That's my problem with using that term, is that, and even if that's not what you mean, I think in a lot of cases that's what's coming across, because in no way does anyone think, oh, slice of life, this is going to be captivating.
Right.
No one ever says that about slice of life. They already go in with reduced expectations, and it's really hard to be spectacular when somebody already comes in when you're telling them, hey, listen, don't have a lot of expectations.
You know what I often think of when first of all, what I often think of when I think of slice of life, and unfortunately I have a similar attitude, is I often think of boredom.
Yeah.
Usually when I think of a slice of life comic, it's like, I'm going to express in illustrated form ennui. Like, here I am putting on socks. Here I am going out to the park. I'm sprinkling some bird seed. Now I'm sitting on the bench looking abjectly into the sky. You know what I mean? That always feels what slice of life comics are. Is like, I'm by myself. I'm sitting quietly. Here I am. And so what I tend to feel the result is that it's usually when I'm reading a slice of life comic, it's usually a very good illustrator that should have been paired with a good writer, is what I usually feel like.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you have the chops. You know how to communicate a moment of human existence very clearly in drawing form. But now let's put a little oomph behind that and pair you up with a good writer. That's what I usually feel about slice of life. There's a subset of like Franco-Belgian comics and comics they always seem to be out of trendier cities in the U.S. Either New York or Toronto. If it's Canada, it's Toronto or Seattle or San Francisco, where it's the single artist and they're having trouble going through their day, and it feels like Ziggy without words. You know, it's like, I'm by myself again, and I have my socks, and here I am with my drawers, and oh, look at me.
It's Ziggy with skinnier characters.
It's Ziggy with a latte.
Ziggy and skinny jeans.
Ziggy with pants on.
Yes.
Now let's try it for a split second. Let's try to take the alternate view here, because you and I are coming off as old men on a porch. Is there a slice of life that we can think of where we're like, they did it well. That was good stuff?
No, because as soon as you start, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You were so quick.
and I'll tell you why. Because as soon as it starts being good, it stops being slice of life and starts being whatever it's supposed to be.
It
comedy,
starts either being a romance or a drama or exactly.
Now here's the deal. I'm gonna play along with you now, but I'm gonna go another direction. Should we make our question asker feel bad because they like slice of life comics and said I really like. No, absolutely not. If that's what grooves you, then you do that thing, and don't never let me tell you differently. As an artist, however, as a cartoonist, as a comics creator, however, the reason that you're listening to this podcast, I want you to be very careful about using slice of life comics as branding, because I think you can do better by getting more specific. And also, I think just mentally, once you stop thinking about yourself as a slice of life comics artist and start pushing beyond that, you're going to raise the bar for yourself as a creator, and you're going to have to hit that new mark. And I think there's nothing better that could happen is to raise the bar for yourself when you're creating this, to go beyond slice of life and to get to whatever that next step is.
Yeah. They always say that that phrase of a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. I feel like a slice of life comic is the first step, when really what you want to be drawing is that 1,000th step, where the thing actually happens. So like if you're doing a slice of life comic, it's kind of the precursor chapter before the protagonist goes out and falls in love, or goes on an adventure, or gets fired, or gets divorced, or when the story actually starts. It's like, here now, it's, you know what it is, Brad? It's the cartooning equivalent of that story we were all assigned in 6th grade of describe how you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, sure, you can do it as an artistic exercise, but I don't know that it gets you much. Other than, here's what slice of life usually communicates to me is, hey, gang, here's a universality to life that everyone experiences boredom, right? So here's a slice of life of my boring life, right? And we all have that, right? It's like, yeah, we do all have that, but art is meant to be the escape from that, or the educational, edifying thing that takes you away from slice of life. I don't know. So for me, it's perfectly fine and valid that it exists and people enjoy it. It's not to my taste. I don't particularly get much out of it.
I think you can push yourself further.
To me, what slice of life is if you enjoy good illustration and you revel just in illustration, then you want to see the sequentiality of comics applied just to illustration, and that's perfectly fine for you. That's enough. But for a lot of people, myself included, you want more than just illustration for illustration's sake, which is kind of what slice of life is a little bit. But that being said, Brad and I are willing to hear, maybe in the Discord server over at patreon.com/ComicLab, you can tell us, hey, Brad and Dave, you completely missed this fantastic piece of slice of life comics that changed the course.
Do that.
What's that?
Don't tell them, because that's what we're going to get, and it's going to drive me crazy. Because because I'll
tell you why I don't mind doing that.
Okay, go ahead.
No one's going to point to something. They're going to say, "Hey, what about Chris Ware?" And I'm going to be like, "Yeah, but no one really enjoys reading Chris Ware."
Well, or they're going to point to for example, a really funny comic that's based on somebody's life as a
but then that's
waitstaff.
A comedy. What I'm saying is
that was going to be my point. Is like
what I'm going to say is there's no pure slice of life where people go, this one changed my life. This one was edifying, or this one was morally uplifting, or this one. Most of all, what you're going to get when it's a pure slice of life comic is, oh, look, that artist feels bored sometimes too. Or, oh, look, they feel alone sometimes too. Because that's always what it is. It's either boredom or solitary. The sense of solitary and aloneness is what, quote unquote, slice of life tends to be, you know?
Yeah.
Because if it's anything else, there's a story there. If it's either another character, it becomes a story of human interaction, and then there's more there. That's
my point. As soon as it starts becoming good, it stops becoming slice of life.
We are the grumpiest old men with this.
Sorry, it's
as soon as there's a point to it, it stops becoming slice of life.
So I mean, we couldn't have chosen a worst one. Yeah, go to the next question. Maybe I'll have something delightful and optimistic to say about our next question.
Here's slice of life. Slice of life is I'm going to say one more thing. Slice of life is, oh look, Odysseus is raking up hay before he goes on his adventure. There's Odysseus, like raking up hay in his backyard. We don't need to talk about his grand adventure. No one needs to read the Odyssey. Let's just focus on Odysseus raking up hay. That's fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move. Let's move on. Man. Brad. So these next two questions are similar. So I'm going to combine them into one big question for you. But I'm going to read them both to you right now, okay? So this one comes in from 35 Min, and it says, hey guys, how come I rarely see either you have fun and get creative with the comic medium using panels? Like make the panel part of the art sort of thing. Like a doorway or a window frame or a porthole or a lens or something.
Yeah.
You guys seem to stick to the standard square rectangular box most of the time. Is there a reason for that? Or is it just no need for that to happen? And then there's a second question, Brad. You had also said that we were getting a question in, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was about diagonal gutters and why we don't use or see or implement diagonal gutters more into our art. The same kind of angle. We both tend to use the standard square or rectangular panel design. So, Brad, I think the general thrust of both questions were why not more creative in our own panel design?
Because nobody in the history of comics has ever said, I want to read that comic because it's got interesting panel layouts in it, right? Nobody in the history of comics has ever said, you've got to read this thing. It's got circular panels and triangular panels and a couple of long horizontal panels. It's the best panel layout I've ever seen in a. Nobody's ever said that. You know what they're more interested in? What's happening inside the panels. And that's where I choose to put my creativity, inside the panels. The page design, the positions of the panels on the page is utilitarian. It's what carries the story the best. It's so many times you see a lot of times, and in a lot of manga and in a lot of superhero comics, you see a bunch of these trapezoidal panels, right? Where they've got these, again, going back to the diagonal gutters, they've got these long, acute angles on the inside trapezoids, and it's a very difficult space to illustrate inside. And it creates sometimes very difficult reading experiences as you're trying to navigate through all these weird shapes on the page. The problem with that is nobody cares. Nobody cares if I take a ship and I have one of the portals actually be a panel in the comic. Nobody cared about that, except for those 3 guys who were sequential art majors at SCAD who got really excited about that. Everybody else,
okay, keep going.
Everybody else shrugged and said, or I had a hard time understanding what was going on and was like, do I really want to be reading this? Here's my point. There's lots of places to put your creativity. You should be absolutely pushing yourself creatively to the nth degree, and you should be putting that in your writing and in your illustration. Trying to prove how creative you can get on your page design in terms of the panels themselves, to me, is a waste of time, because not only does nobody care, in a lot of cases, and I'll make this next point as soon as I let you actually get a word in edgewise, but it actually makes it harder to read the page. What do you think?
I'm glad that you and I are starting off this year as the 2 most curmudgeonly cartoonists that have ever existed, because
we're the worst.
In large stripes, I super agree with Brad.
Yeah.
That to me, Brad, have you ever gone through like the National Gallery in Washington or the Portrait Gallery in London, and you'll see painting after painting that's beautiful, gorgeous painting, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll come across a so-so painting and you find that your eye is noticing this gigantic ass 10-inch gold frame that some curator has put on a so-so painting, but you're like, dang, that frame! Look at that thing! That thing! Someone really built the hell out of that frame.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's failure.
Yeah.
The frame is not meant to be the focal point. The frame is meant to clear the eye from the surrounding space and say, this is the special thing to look at, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to focus your brain on the painting. So when your eye goes, man, the hell with the painting, but look at this frame.
Look at the frame job
then
on
that's
that.
a process that failed. That didn't work.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at art for art's sake, which is just the frame itself, and not looking at the message, the means, the portrayal of the painting. And what I'm getting at there is that 99.9% of the time with comics, you want the panel to disappear from the front of mind awareness of the reader. You want them to be skipping from panel to panel without kind of thinking that there is a panel there. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is the artifice that you hope, much like a word balloon, that you hope that it disappears from the reader's awareness, right?
Yep.
Now, That being said, there are artists that we can all agree are famous for their paneling and their layout. George Harriman with Crazy Cat those are objects of art. Those full pages that have been designed around a circular display or a triangular display or a falling horizontal display or whatever George was doing that week.
Yeah.
Those are inarguably beautiful. And as much as I was joking around about Chris Ware before, his layouts are beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
They are, but again, it's one of those things where the layout tends to take more emphasis than the message, which I think is a failure when that happens. Where I think it's been done well, it's because it wasn't used for 99% of the comic, but then the panel is really well and artfully changed up so that you become aware of a psychological break of the character because the panels are falling apart, or you become aware that their world is falling apart because their panels are literally falling off the page, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Where I've seen interesting paneling done, it's in support of the story, not to distract from the story. Right, Brad?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, so all of that stuff you said is true. And I'm going to take it one more step. And that is that it's actually dangerous to get into this area in today's publishing landscape. And that is because so much of what we as cartoonists are trying to get our work out there involves social media and smaller screens. Okay. Yeah. Now, I do, by the way, this question asker said that all my panels are rectangular. I entreat you. I encourage you to look at the actual comic that I do, Evil Inc., because you'll see circular panels on every third comic.
I know you love a circular panel.
I actually use them for a reason, but you got to also be careful how you use them. Here's where I'm getting to in this, and that is you can do a certain amount of interesting things with a compositional reason for doing them on the page, but as you're building that page, I feel very strongly that you have to be preparing that page so that it can be torn down into panel by panel by panel chunks that can be put into a vertical scroll, because that's how more and more, and I'm going to argue if it's not the majority of comics readers, it soon will be the majority of comics readers who are reading this on a vertical scroll on their phone. Yeah. You should still be preparing for the printed page because that's where the money is. But you should be preparing for the vertical scroll because that's where the readers are. And you can't get to the money without getting to the readers. So I'll have two rectangular panels and float a circular panel in between them. But if you'll notice, in the negative space around that circular panel is all stuff that can be trimmed right out of those rectangles without hurting the rectangles. Because the end result is that I want to be able to clip every one of those panels, put them into a vertical scroll, whether it's on Patreon or whether it's on Webtoons or whether it's on my own site that now is fully responsive to mobile users, because I need them to read that in a vertical scroll. And if you're doing diagonal gutters and trapezoidal panels and all that kind of stuff, you're shooting yourself in the foot because those are virtually impossible to convert to a vertical scroll. Yeah.
One person that I think does do interesting paneling, two people that I can think of that do interesting paneling, the benefit of their story, because they do it sparingly, and when they do incorporate it, it's to great purpose.
Yeah.
Meredith Grand with Octopus Pie had a couple pages, and it's a shame that I can't link to you on a podcast, but had a couple key pages where the paneling was extraordinary and aided the flow and the theme of the psychological state of the story at that moment. And so because it was used sparingly and in very key moments, then it becomes a tool in a toolbox, right, for a cartoonist. Then that helps you convey the mood of the story at that moment. And another cartoonist that does that very well because she uses it sparingly, and when she does, it's to great effect, is Dylan McConis. Also it uses it in a way that helps contribute to the psychological state of the story, the thematic state of the story, all that sort of thing. But again, for the most part, it's like walking into a house and saying, "Oh, Brad, to hell with the color and the flooring and the window dressing. Tell me about the framing of this house. I want to hear more about how were these 2x4s constructed." I guess what I'm saying is it's putting the emphasis on the wrong thing with comics. If you're like, "Oh, these boxes I don't care about this story, but I love these boxes. These are great boxes."
Yeah. Take a look at that drywall. No, it's which I do have more of an appreciation for than I used to. But
I love, by the way, that on a show where we do sound curmudgeonly, you're also getting a bit of a cold. So you do literally sound like, these comics with a goddamn paneling. I don't want, get off my lawn, you kids.
All I need is a cheek full of tobacco, and I would be every old man that I grew up with.
I will say this, though. The younger Dave Kellett, if you look back through the 4,000 Sheldons in the... Oh, God, I can't believe there's that many in the archives. If you look back through the 4,000 Sheldons, you'll see me occasionally experiment with a circle or a triangle or a parallelogram or something fun. Mm-hmm. And 99% of the time, you'll be like, why was he... This didn't contribute to this comic strip at all. Why or this comic page, or why did he do this? And part of it was I was experimenting, right? The younger me was trying. Yeah. And older me will occasionally, not even occasionally, rarely put in something unique. But when I do, it's because I'm trying to contribute to the story with the paneling, with the word balloons, with the lettering, with all of the ancillary stuff that's fourth tier read. I'm trying to help that contribute to the story. But for the most part, when I used it as a younger cartoonist, it was unnecessary. Didn't work. Didn't contribute to the story. If anything, it was distracting from the story. Yep. Because you're like, why is this panel suddenly a circle? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And what happened for me is I did that too. In fact, that was the first thing I did when I did, well, not the first thing I did when I started After Dark, but one of the first things that I did was because After Dark was a full page thing. And it was the first time I had been doing full page stuff. Even Evil Inc. was in half pages, but After Dark started becoming these full pages, and I let myself loose on that, doing exactly what I'm advocating against. And I'll tell you why I advocate against it, because then when I went back and tried to put those into ebooks, when I build an ebook these days, it's not just a PDF of the book. That's one version. I build a second version called a smartphone edition that basically puts all of those vertical scroll panels into one big document that can be read on your phone. Yeah. By the way, I don't know that anybody else is doing this. I think I may be alone in that practice, but I can't tell you how strongly I believe in doing that as we move forward. I think pretty soon everybody's going to be doing it.
And I will put one last capstone on this. If you are a cartoonist for whom the art and the artifice of comic making is something where the panels, you are intrigued by that, and you do you lean more towards an illustrator than a writer, and Brad and I lean more towards writers than being illustrators. There are people for whom the illustration of a comic and the creation of a comic as an object of art is really important to them. And if you are one of those people and you do want to do interesting and weird panels, I will say, as a Photoshop user, what you want to be using is Clip Studio Paint, not Photoshop, because Clip Studio Paint can really enable some really interesting paneling in a way that Photoshop cannot. Yeah. So I'm saying this as a Photoshop user, the way you want to go is Clip Studio Paint, not what I use.
Yeah. And the upshot of the ebook conversation was just that when after having done those wild page designs and tried to cut them up and put them into a vertical scroll, I made so many headaches for myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That it was just later on, it was like I just started making a bunch of rules for myself about how these pages could be put together so that I could do what I needed to do in terms of composition and still have a vertical scroll at the end.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Okay, Brad. Well, now we have to turn to the Department of Corrections.
This is exciting.
We've got a, Comic Lab is a fact-based show, Brad. So when one of us gets something wrong, we have to correct those facts. And I got 2 facts wrong in recent shows, and I, without any prompting, feel like I need to correct them. One of them, and this is the most important fact I need to correct, is that the Beach Boys, when they self-plagiarize with Little Saint Nick, the song was not 405 that they were self-plagiarizing, Brad. It was Little Deuce Coupe, and I want to issue a big apology for that one.
You know what? The funny thing is as you were saying that, I was singing the song in my head, and I'm like, man, I don't remember how they pulled that off.
I will admit, though, that Game has to recognize Game here, and kudos to the Beach Boys for going for that cash grab. They're like, you know what was a freaking hit? Little Deuce Coupe. You know what we can make more money on a B-side? Little Saint Nick. That'll take 5 minutes to put that down as a track. Let's do it. Come on, fellas. Hey, you guys don't want a second house? I want a second house. Let's record Little Saint Nick. This is going to be great.
Yeah, and everybody needs a Christmas album. I'd like to know if there's any entertainer who hasn't done a holiday-themed album. Like, once you get to a certain level, you've got to put one out.
Yeah, it's kind of it's just it's a wonderful cash flow, those Christmas albums.
And they're all standards, they're all songs that
you know. If you get a hit, you are set for the next 40 years, you know? Mariah Carey never needs to work again.
I was going to say, we're looking at you, Mariah.
All right, and then the second line item from the Department of Corrections. This one's close to my heart, and I'm mad that I got this wrong. Because the point was that it was a bad name, and I guess it was so bad that I forgot how to pronounce it. It was not Grogu, Brad. It was Grogu. Grogu was the name of young baby, the child that is Baby Yoda.
I thought Grogu was that new organic spaghetti sauce.
Well, so this correction does give us one more chance to talk about why that's a bad name. And I'll tell you why it's a bad name. It's, first of all, it's uncomfortable mouthfeel. And second of all, say it out loud to yourself right now at home. You have to reset your jaw to make the second syllable. So you go grow, and your mouth is pushing forward, and you have to reset it back to go grow. You know, like, anyway, it suffers from having weird mouthfeel because of that resetting that your jaw has to go through. And it's just unfortunate. So that was the main thing with the Department of Corrections that I wanted to chime in on, Brad.
Well, listen, Dave, we took a very negative, pessimistic stance on the first 2 topics of 2021.
Boy, we sure did, didn't we?
You've got to give me a topic that I can be joyful and happy about.
Well, I do. I can move a question up that we had on our list. It is funny, though, that 2020 definitely had an effect on us because we come into 2021 just full of piss and vinegar. Like, hey, guys, what do you think about Charlie Brown? Charlie Brown can go to hell. That's what Charlie Brown can do. What do you guys think about Opus the Penguin? I hate Opus the Penguin.
We just are loaded for bear from the very beginning.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, Brad, here is a topic that will be near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
This comes in from listener Paula at patreon.com/ComicLab, and Paula says, hello, Brad and Dave. For a long time now, I wanted to do a not suitable for work comic, but something is always holding...
Finally, something I can be happy about.
We've made Grandpa happy. All right, good job.
Okay, serve it up. I can talk about this.
Here we go, Brad. So Paula writes, for a long time now, I wanted to do a not suitable for work comic, but something is always holding me back. Parenthetically, like society's view of my art and so on. Yeah. Since Brad has overcome this and published a not suitable for work comic, I wanted to ask, how did you convince yourself to do After Dark anyway? Like, what was your journey from then to this day? Do you still struggle sometimes with this topic? Thanks for the great podcast. I love listening to it every morning. Thank you, Paula. That was really nice of them for the kind words. I appreciate that. So Bradley... Not suitable for work. The journey to not suitable for work, if someone who has never done it before and who is feeling all the feelings that you could have on the way to that. How did do you want to do your personal journey first?
I'm not joking around when I say I love this topic, because I think it's kind of an important topic without being silly about it. But what I want you to do is go back to listen to an episode we did, I think in our very first year of doing Comic Lab. It was episode number 31. And I talked about this in a lot more detail than I'm going to give it today, just because I don't want to go over some old ground.
Right.
But it's super important to kind of understand where my head was at and where your head is probably at, and give you some heads up on some things that you'll probably be dealing with. But having said that, here's one thing you've got to do for yourself before you decide to take this road, and that is you've got to decide how you feel about presenting sexual situations, and how you feel about drawing nudity and drawing intimate behavior, and how you feel about bringing that into your storytelling. For me, it became like a philosophical discussion I had to have with myself. Where Dave and I joke about being raised Catholic all the time. The idea of doing this for somebody who was raised in a very small provincial setting in Michigan as a Catholic.
Oh my God! You saying provincial made me realize you're Belle.
Yes. What, do you think I was the Beast? Dave, in this duo, I am Beauty.
That's amazing. Brad wakes up in the morning in Bad Axe, Michigan, there goes the baker with it. Da, 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 da.
I know, and what a snotty song when it comes right down to it.
I just like the idea of you twirling around Bad Axe, Michigan in snow boots.
Except it's not the library I'm going to, it's the dirty bookstore. No, but so I had to have a conversation with myself. How do I feel about this? And philosophically, I had to kind of go down the chain of well, sex is normal, sex is natural. Therefore, stories about sex should not be something that is embarrassing or it's something that we should hide away. Certainly, keep it from people that it's not age appropriate. Mm-hmm. But in terms of sharing these stories with people who are have reached an age of maturity, this is something that I had to decide, is this okay? And you may, by the way, come to a different philosophical conclusion for you. And you cannot tell me that my philosophy is wrong. And I would never try to tell you to think differently. But you've got to decide how you feel about this. The next thing I had to do is think about, how is this going to be viewed in my community, by my family, et cetera, et cetera. And also keeping in mind that I do certain things like teaching college and so forth. And I do a lot of that kind of outreach. Philosophically, again, I didn't feel comfortable using a pen name because I had just gotten done talking to myself, saying that this is perfectly natural and normal. So why do I need a pen name? Right. Once you go down that road, then you're starting to. And by the way, I'm not casting aspersions on people who make that decision. But for me, it didn't fit the philosophy that I had spent time thinking about. So I didn't want to use a pen name for me. But here's the thing that was really interesting. So one of the first times I spoke in front of a group of college students, a friend of mine, Christian Patchell, had called me in to talk in front of his sequential art class. And I said, okay. And Christian's a guy I've known from the Philadelphia comic scene for years. And I said, I just to let you know, I'm doing, it was just when I was starting. I said, I'm doing this not safe for work stuff. The first thing you need to know is that this is going on, because I don't want to be standing in class and have some kid Google me on their phone and create a situation that you may not be prepared for. He laughed. He says, people that age don't Google anymore. They don't Google people. Like, how you and I used to do an ego surf on Google to see if anybody was talking. We'd put our own name into Google to see if it was showing up.
Sure.
He goes, people this age do not do that. They will not Google you. It'll be the last thing on their minds. And the ones that do, the other thing you got to realize, for people my age and your age, Dave, this was something that we grew up with a whole lot more gatekeepers around adult content, right?
Right.
There was Playboy magazine. There was, movies in a certain theater on the other side of town. There was that sort of, there was the Playboy channel on cable, but there was a lot of gatekeepers. The generations coming up, they can all find it on their phones and very easily, right? In other words, there's not as much of a separation there. There's not as much of that must be one of those people, because they're exposed a lot more to a greater variety of content and storytelling, if you will. So what I'm finding personally is that younger people have a lot less problems with it because it's something that's a little bit more accessible. Whereas for you and me, it was that Playboy magazine that was out in the woods that we ran across, right?
Can I make a comparison?
Yeah.
So I grew up in a fairly small, quiet town in Southern California, probably not unlike you with Bad Axe, Michigan. And when I went to college at Notre Dame, I got there, and any kid that had grown up in downtown New York, downtown Philly, downtown Chicago, the parallel that I'm going to make here is cussing.
Yeah.
Those kids, you could not shock them at all because they had grew up in downtown New York, right?
Yeah.
But where they excelled was the creativity of language. Does that make sense? Because cussing was passé to them. It's like, yeah, okay, I could say a cuss word, but that's not going to get me anywhere. Whereas a kid from the small town would be like, oh, they said damn, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was that kid, by the way. But for them, I've found that kids that grew up in New York or Philly or Chicago or a heavy downtown area where you interacted with everybody as a 12-year-old, intensely closely, versus a suburb type of life is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Their ability to use language, it started to transcend, and so it became more about like the magic and the beauty of an insult that was creative, rather than just I'm going to throw a cuss word at you, which is what the small town kids did. Right. And so I think part of the parallel here is it's where you are on your own journey in terms of the comfort and the because you had started to say, and I lost my thread as to where I was building off of. But what were you saying just before I jumped in with my city kid talk?
I was saying that in the past and in the world you and I grew up with.
Oh, that's what it was. Gatekeepers. Yes, I'm so sorry. I forgot what the thread was. Good job, Dave. Dave Kellett, conversationalist. No, that was my thread, was that because for the city kids, the gatekeepers weren't there, because you would be walking down the street and you'd hear a construction worker going, what the fuck is this with the steel beam moving? As they're yelling at each other with the crane. A kid in a small town doesn't hear that.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is kids now with the internet, it's more akin to having grown up in the cities, because you just hear more, you see more, you see a broader spectrum of what. There's no gatekeepers on what the varieties of life is. I guess is one way of saying it.
And I'm not even talking about straight out 18 and over content. Now, all you got to do is look at TikTok for a few minutes and see that there's a lot of thirst trap content. on TikTok, so all of that plays.
That's
into
all I
it.
post, by the way, on TikTok.
Yeah, that's the only reason I follow you.
Yeah, it's just.
But so
that's the only reason I follow you.
That gave me a great mental image. But so there's a couple other points that I do want to make. Number one, obviously, your family. This is something that's not only got to be right for you, but it's got to be right for your family.
Right.
For my family, it meant that we were always very open and frank in sex talk with our kids in terms of giving them information that they need, getting them the newest book by Erica Moen was a big part of that, Drawn Together, which is on our bookshelf. But we were all very open and honest about that. So that just gave us another talking point to talk about some of these subjects. As a matter of fact, just that I'm not making this up. A week ago, I was sharing with the kids. I came back from the studio. They said, "How was your day?" And I said, "Oh, all day I worked on this one page, but it took me hours to get the writing right, and I was just having a tough part of it." And Max goes, "Well, I'd love to know, what was the story?" I said, "Well, it was an After Dark story." Max goes, "I don't want to hear anything more." Alex, sitting next to him, says, "Now I want to hear the story." I said, both of those answers are perfectly appropriate.
That's right. That's right.
But and the funny thing is, like, in terms of like people in our community, almost nobody has said anything to me directly. Mm-hmm. But Carolyn will tell me later, like, they'll come up to
Mrs. Terwilliger
her.
said some things. Yeah.
They'll come up to her and say, "How do you feel about this?" And Carolyn goes, I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. They're expecting her to be, well, what a shame on our family. You know,
Tut-tutting kind of, yeah.
Yeah, they're expecting the drama. And they're like, well, to get her off to the side, how do you feel about this?
Right.
And she's like, I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful. The last point I want to make is that you've also got to think about sex and storytelling in a broader scope. And by this, I mean particularly issues of consent, okay? And other issues indeed. But once you put a sexual spin on things, certain things have a whole different meaning. I'll tell you a great example. One of the first things that I did when I started After Dark, I loved the idea of taking all these superhero tropes and putting them into that kind of retelling, right? Put them into a sexual situation. And one of the first ones I did was the one that we've seen on superhero stories from the time that we were 5 years old watching Super Friends, eating cereal in front of the Saturday morning TV, the mind control glasses, right? I put these glasses on and I can control your mind. I started doing that, and I started the story. And one of my Patreon backers,
you can't. Yeah,
one of my Patreon backers just sent me a little note, very, very nice, and I'm thankful for this to this day. Said, I just got a question. If she's under mind control, can she consent? And I'm like, oh, being the super privileged white guy that I am, never crossed my mind, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, I'm like, ooh, yeah, you know what? You're right. And it was the only story that I've ever changed that I had already started.
Midstream. Yeah.
I came up with a completely different. It was like that story took a left turn because all of a sudden and to be completely honest, I was not used to thinking in those terms. But now it's not just
right. You know, the tropes, all the tropes of superpowers fighting one another. You have to be really careful with that.
It's not just naked people anymore. Now there's a whole nother meaning to that. And so, very much related side note, everyone should look up the historical use of Wonder Woman's lasso of truth in the original Wonder Woman's context. Very awkward when you look back on it now. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, that guy's story is amazing.
That whole story is amazing.
But he was clearly into bondage.
Yeah.
Which is, that's fine. That was his thing. But man, it came through. And of course, as you know, also the creator of the lie detector.
What? I didn't know that.
The man who created Wonder Woman and her lasso of truth also created the equipment that would later be known as a lie detector test.
What? Wow, I did not know that. I'm going to go read about that after this. That's amazing. Well, so I would say, too, I would broaden this, Brad, to say that for someone considering doing a not suitable for work comic, it is not a huge jump to say it's not unlike someone considering doing a political comic or doing a religious comic or doing anything where the topics get trigger people for all different ways in society and in families. And so a lot of it is just the same consideration is balancing out your relationships in your life, balancing out what's important to you, what your truths are in terms of what you want to create in your art, and then finding the best path forward for you in a safe way, in a way where you are psychologically safe and physically safe and all that sort of stuff, I think. Don't you think, Brad? Yeah, it's got to be right for you. It can't be something that you do just because, you think, well, this is going to be a great thing. Although with all creative pursuits, that's certainly one of the first things that comes to mind. But it's got to be the right fit. But I certainly wouldn't let yourself be dissuaded for it because you think that people will think less of you or they'll think that you're a dirty person or something like that. Clearly, there's going to be people like that, but listen, there's people like that no matter what you do, right? Right. You at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I think less of Brad no matter what he does. So that's believe me, we see that week after week. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. But no, I think it's got to be the right fit for you. But I love seeing, and here's what's happening, Dave. You're seeing this happen more and more. You're seeing a little bit of an explosion in not safe for work comics.
even from people who do work for Marvel and DC, have their own. I'm thinking
Side stuff,
specifically of like, I think it's called Bloodstone. I follow the artist specifically because I love the art so much. But also somebody that does something called Sweet Paprika. The art is unbelievable. But I love seeing this because in the same way that webcomics opened up a whole lot of voices that we hadn't heard in comics, this same explosion is happening a little bit more slowly, but is definitely happening. And we're seeing a lot more ideas and people and characters that we haven't seen in this kind of not safe for work comics before. We're seeing a lot more different expressions, a little bit wider idea of what is considered attractive, and I'm here for it. I think this is a great time to be doing not safe for work.
Well, I think that was a great answer on your part for that one, Brad, and thank you for sharing your own journey on that one.
Yeah, finally something we could be upbeat about.
I know, exactly. Well, here's another one to get upbeat about. It's this comes in from Call Me the Bomb, please. This question comes in at patreon.com/ComicLab. Says, hey guys, when you first started out working part-time in comics day job, comics / your day job, how did you get into the comics groove when you got home? You've suggested having a special space or a table just for comics. Yep, I think that's a great idea. But what did you do when you sat down? How did you get out of day job work mode and into comic creation work mode? This is a great question, Brad. How you want to tackle this one? How did you get into the mood? How do you get in the mood when you have to sit down, Brad? Like, let's say even today, you've been doing bills or you just got the groceries into the house. All right, time to do comics. How do you get in the mood to do comics quickly, right away, in a set amount of time?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for it because my own personal experience with this was very different than Call Me the Bomb's experience was. In fact, in certain ways, polar opposite. When I was doing a full-time job and my kids were smaller and my time was incredibly condensed, what would happen was I would work at the newspaper until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, get up and get my kids to school, and then drag myself to the studio. By the time I got to the studio, I wanted nothing more than to be doing comics because I'd been doing all that other stuff. That was good stuff. Spending time with my kids, loved it. Family time, I was there for it. Working at the newspaper, I didn't love it, but I was good at it, and there was something about that kind of fulfillment. But by the time I got into that space to do comics, that's what I was working for. I was living for that moment when I would open up the door, walk into that room, and sit. You couldn't keep me from it. You couldn't distract me from it. There was no getting into the mood. I was salivating by the time I pulled into the parking lot. I wanted nothing more than to do comics. I don't know how to give you advice on this. Although I will say now that my time management is different and I'm not working a full-time job, sometimes it is easy to get distracted by things like I've got to pay bills or I got to work on my taxes and I would rather do comics right now. Or, I'm stuck on a creative problem and I want to be drawing, but I've got to be writing and the writing is not coming. But I don't know that and by the way, let me just pause myself right there. That doesn't mean if your brain is set up differently that you're a bad person or that you're going to fail or that you're not a cartoonist. None of that is correct. It just means that my mind was wired a certain way and other very successful creators have minds that are wired a completely different way. How is your brain wired?
Well, the way I want to answer this one is to structure your physical space and your mental space for success for the time when you're going to sit down and do comics. And what do I mean by that? So we've already talked in the past, and I'll do a quick 2-second version of it, is try to create one space in your house. And I had this even when I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, one little corner of one little room that was a desk that when I sat at that desk, that was when I was making comics. And I didn't do bills at that desk. and I didn't, whatever it is, chop onions at that desk. I didn't do anything else. I don't know why I'd be chopping onions. But what I'm saying is that desk, the only reason that desk exists and that chair existed was to make comics. So when I sat down there, it's equivalent to how they always say, don't bring electronics into bed because then you're fooling your mind. And I fail at that every night. But you
bring electronics into bed quite a bit.
Damn you. So what I'm getting at here is I had a physical space, right? But then also create a mental space for yourself. And what I mean by that is I had a day job. The most recent one was at Mattel Toys. And when we would be working, if there was a boring meeting, they owned me for that time. I was there. I was at the meeting. I was taking notes, but I was also kind of jotting down ideas for that night's comic on the side of my notepad, right? Or I was at my lunch break. I was sketching out or breaking a story or doing a thumbnail sketch of what that night's comic was going to be. I was prepping myself for success so that when I finally got home to that desk, like Brad said, I was living for that moment, prepping all day so that I could go do that comic when I got there at night. And so another technique that I would sometimes use that I borrowed from fiction writers is whatever work was from the night before, you leave 5% of it unfinished.
Oh, what a great idea.
And so that when you get back home that night from work, you're tired, you get your shoes off, you put on shorts and a more comfortable t-shirt from work, and then you're sit down at the desk, you're like, oh, the last corner of this panel is not finished. I'm going to just finish this up real quick. And then you're in it already, bing, bang, boom, without any thought, Brad. You're already drawing, you're already creating, right?
Yeah.
And so you can do similar ideas with scripts. You can do similar ideas with thumbnails or storyboarding or a 99% finished comic itself. Is give yourself a tiny bit of work to start the next day. And this works best when you're working ahead, by the way, but give yourself a tiny bit of work to start the next day. And then mentally you're prepped to go so that when you do get that time or when someone says, we got 20 minutes before we're leaving for the thing, you can go cartoon if you want. You go, woohoo, and you run off to the room and you've got a little bit of work to work on. You don't have to start from blank sheet, right? And so, but Brad, when you were in that office, when you were in that space where mentally you were at the paper all day long, did you do like I did, and you would be kind of jotting down ideas and stuffing them in your pocket for later in the day?
And it was kind of an encouragement for me to be faster and better at my job because the faster I could get that work out, and not only fast but high quality, because the mistake would be to do it slipshod and then have to deal with corrections that would come in waves, right? One editor after another. I need this corrected. I need that corrected. The goal was to do my stuff so well and at so high a quality that I'd have time at the end of the night. And then that time belonged to me. Once my deadlines were met, once all my stuff was done, and of course, any opportunity I had to do cartoon style illustrations at the paper, I would take that as well, and it would kind of scratch that same itch. But man, if I get my stuff done early, then the rest of that time belonged to me, and that was a joy.
And I will say this too, and I know it's true with Brad too, because we've talked about this, but in my 20s, I was, for whatever reason, very good at being self-sacrificing because I wanted nothing more than to be a cartoonist. Come hell or high water, I was going to be a cartoonist. And so friends would be like, and remember, this is my 20s, so this was more possible. Friends would be like on a Thursday night, hey, we're going out. You want to come out? No, I got a cartoon. Or hey, there's an incredibly good new long form video game that everyone's talking about. Nope, not getting it for myself. I want to be a cartoonist. I want to be a cartoonist more than I want to watch TV or play a video game or go out or do this or that because I knew that it was that temporary sacrifice that would get me a longer term gain. And I failed in a lot of aspects of my life with that sort of stuff. But for whatever reason, with cartooning, it always won out over another pastime or over another thing that I could be doing. I was always like, nope, I'm going to be a cartoonist. That's what I want to be. And so when I did get that time, I'd been thinking about it all day and sacrificing for it all week to get to that. And so by God, I was going to do it when the time came.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I at the risk of getting pessimistic again, that's my problem with questions about motivation is I really don't know how to talk about motivation to another person. I don't know how to want something for you.
Right.
I know how to want something for myself. I don't know how to make you want to do something. And I'll be just brutally honest. That's because the answer is I can't. And if you don't want to do comics when you sit down, I could give you all kinds of tips and tricks and tell you to tie a string around your finger and dance around a circle. Nothing's going to work because you've got to want to do the comic in that moment. I can't tell you how to want something. And by the way, it's okay if you don't want to do that. Yeah. Maybe you want to do something else, and that's good too. Doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you're on a journey. And that's the important thing about the journey is not to try to make yourself do something that you really deep down don't want to do. Mm-hmm. You've got to decide that for yourself. And that's when I get really edgy and a little bit nervous every time we talk about motivation, because that really is at the bottom of it for me. I don't know how to want something for you.
Yeah, it's hard because we've had this conversation too, Brad, where for artist friends, we can't want it for them more than they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, you ultimately have to make your own magic in this world. And if you're waiting on someone else to go, now you're an artist or now you can create, then you're going to be waiting a long time, because you've got to want it in a way that, like, even if no income ever came in, even if no adulation ever came in, that it was. Now, that's stupid, because I always knew that the adulation or money would come if I kept at it or worked hard enough. So I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I knew that I wanted to be a cartoonist more than anything else. Related to this, Brad, my wife often teaches a writer's course, writing courses, either a TV writing course or a play writing course at the college level. Mm-hmm. And an interesting angle that she sometimes takes on it that I had not considered before, but it's in line with this thought that you can't want it for people more than they want it themselves, you know?
Yeah.
She stands up in the front of a class of 20, 30, 40 people and goes, only one of you are going to make it in this class, in the industry. Only one of you.
No, not you.
And then, and then she goes on and she talks and talks and talks. And then she goes back and she says, now, earlier in the class, when I said only one of you are going to make it, mm-hmm. in your heart, did you say that's going to be me? Mm-hmm. Or did you say, like, well, I guess I'll never make it because only one person's going to make it? Mm-hmm. I know, and the reason why that resonated with me is 20-year-old Dave Kellett was like, no, I am going to work harder than anyone I know. I'm going to make it. You know what I mean? I'm going to use every ounce of energy I have to become a cartoonist. And sometimes, and granted, that's not the case with everything in my life. Mm-hmm. So I have to acknowledge that might not be it for you. There might be a whole balance or a cornucopia of things that you want to do in your life. And this is just one part and parcel of it. But part of it is cultivating that energy of, like, no, I only have one life, and I'm gonna. If I want to be a cartoonist, I've got to put in the time and I've got to do it.
Yeah.
And I like I said, we can't want it for you, and nor are we looking down on you if you're not feeling that right now. But try to cultivate a strategy of success so that your whole day is anticipating and ready to go, so that when you do sit at that desk, it's not out of the blue and all of a sudden it's like, no, I've been thinking about this in the back of my mind all day, and I have scraps from last night that I can still work on, and I have a whole idea book of things that I can immediately turn to because I've been saving these up on weekends, and on bus rides and on this and on that kind of thing, you know, Brad?
Yeah. No,
basically setting yourself up for success so that you're not starting cold turkey.
Yeah, that. I guess that's a great way of saying it, is that when I would sit down, it would be like every other moment in my day has been leading up to this.
Yes.
This is the moment I've been working for. This is the reason I work nights at the newspaper. This is the reason I do this and I do that. Everything has been leading up to this.
Exactly. And also, create it so that it is a joyful moment to you. There would be a lot of times at work I would come home tired and angry and grumpy, just because working with dozens of other people, they can be morons sometimes. But comics was my time where I got to do what I wanted to do in the way I wanted to do it, and the process itself was joy-filled. And so I often found that was my reward to me at the end of the day. It was the ice cream at the end of the meal. You know what I mean? And so once I got through all the day, to me, that was the joy-filled goal that I got to at the end of the day.
It's like my reward is being able to podcast with you week after week and say things like this. You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my pal Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com, the host of Many Squirrels in His Backyard, and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. No, I'm sorry, the creator of Evil Inc. I've got to change that.
Yes,
the creator
you
of
do.
Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped, and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that like the squirrels in Brad's backyard. Where's more wire? Bring me more wire. Patreon.com/comiclab. Shelly, the man put out the wire again. Oh, Cashew. Oh, we're going to eat pretty this week. Oh, forget eating scraps. It's wire on the table tonight for the kids.
What'd you call that other squirrel?
Cashew? I think,
Gesundheit.
God bless America. Ah. I'm ending it there.